Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today for Tomorrow podcast. I am here with the fellas. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
This is a multiple part topic. This is a multiple part subject. But the subject is the blueprint, God's blueprint. Mm-hmm. Now, originally, I was saying because we were having this conversation, I said that when I thought of us having this as a subject, I originally said the Black Billionaire Blueprint.
Gotcha.
And you remember I was talking about Jay-Z.
Yep. And
so the crazy thing is, and you remember I had my Kanye West moment. I have them every now and then. I remember we was at your house. We was in the kitchen. Well, I was in the kitchen. You were at the table. Mm-hmm. And I was just telling you about it. And then I outlined the whole thing. You were like, you were asking me, you were like, okay, so what happened next? And then so what did Jay-Z do? And then how does this tie into these other things? And so I pretty much just used your the countertop as the map, because in my head I could see each piece in it. Mm-hmm. So I was just outlining the blueprint that Jay-Z went through. That is the Black Billionaire Blueprint. What I mean by that, the Black Billionaire Blueprint is the roadmap that I have seen that Jay-Z has gone through, Tyler Perry has gone through, Diddy went through, Kevin Hart is currently moving through, Oprah also has gone through, The Rock, he's gone through, and this roadmap has made multiple people extremely successful in whatever their industry is. Now, I've been talking about entertainment, but it's the same thing in every other industry. There was Robert Smith, the richest black person right now. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's the same model. I thought it was new, but it's not. No. Just like nothing else.
Right. There's nothing new under the sun.
No. Right. Jesus actually, his life, his story was literally outlining this blueprint. But even crazier than that, the blueprint was laid out in the first page of the Bible.
Okay, so you laid a whole lot on the table for everybody. This is why this is going to be a multi-episode topic. But so you set the groundwork, you put a lot out there. So where you want to start with that? So maybe Genesis is the right place to start to kind of say what that blueprint is, or maybe even saying that when you talk about Jay-Z, when you broke it down, you talked about how he set things up. So I think people, when you say billionaire, everybody's ears open up.
Right.
Yeah. So how you become a billionaire? So how did he do that? And then take us back to Genesis and break it down for us.
So I'm a big success fan. Mm-hmm. So I like to read success stories. I like to hear about success stories. I like to just know about people winning and how they did it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so Jay-Z, his story particularly is incredibly interesting to me. And I've always admired how he's moved throughout his career. Mm-hmm. He started off, he was doing some shady stuff. All right.
We just leave that where it's at.
But even from that, because like you said, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
And all wisdom, like we've talked about before, comes from God.
Yes, it does.
And God did not say in there, you have to be fully and completely sold out for Christ to use the principles that I've already laid out in the universe.
Correct.
So
I was going to say, so it makes me think of the interesting thing about life, and what I found in my life, you guys might have found in yours, is that the vision may not be revealed to you in the beginning, right? So in the beginning, when he was taking his first steps, for example, or anyone, it could be Jay-Z, it could be Robert Smith, Don Peoples, anybody that's successful, it always starts with your vision at that moment.
Yeah.
Now, we're made to evolve, right? Mm-hmm. So how you think at 20 is not going to be the same way you think at 30, at least hopefully. Hopefully you have some type of evolution.
That's actually, I like that point. And I mean, it goes right to what we talked about too, because I think sometimes when you laid it out, it's almost like Jay-Z had this planned out from when he was in the streets, when he first started out, that he was going to be this.
He couldn't have.
No, he couldn't. And that goes back to what Mike's saying too. It's like, so the reality is that as you go along, you evolve.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to see your next steps.
So one thing that every morning when I pray, especially, well, first with myself, but then with my family and my kids, I always ask God to just grant me clarity, clarity for his vision, because what you have to do is you have to submit to your higher power, that, let God work through you, because he will reveal the plans. And we're all born with special and unique abilities, but you have to remember who you were before the world told you who you should be.
Yes.
And if you look at all kids, I have 3 sons, so I do it often. Every kid is born with a great imagination. You ask them, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a superhero and a firefighter and a scientist.
Yes.
Me personally, I'm like, hey, that's amazing. You should, as you should. What else? But what a lot of parents or society will do is say, be realistic. How you gonna do all that? How you gonna pay those bills? You know what I'm saying? And sometimes, man, that can actually hurt our kids. And it's meant out of love, but we don't understand their blueprint.
Exactly.
Because we don't know what God has placed in each of these kids. Our kids come through us, but they don't belong to us. The same people.
Yep. Now I got you. I know Martell got a microphone malfunction over here, but we'll get to it. And you're right, Mike. I love, and the thing about it too, and I want to tie everything we're saying going back to Genesis 2 and knowing that blueprint, because God is at the key. It starts with him. But Martell said something earlier too, that you can follow God's plan and not necessarily follow God, and the plan can still work from a worldly viewpoint, I guess.
Right.
And I think, when you were saying that, it's like the structure that's set up to create these billionaires and their organizations is the blueprint. Is laid out in the Bible, how you build an organization that flourishes and grows.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important point that you touched on, Rodney. And I think very important specifically for this episode, since we did mention a Jay-Z, please do not lose the message with the messenger per se. Because everyone may have different thoughts about Jay-Z specifically, but that's not the point that I think Martell was bringing up when we're talking about the blueprint. We're really bringing this back to a recipe, so to speak. So it's really nameless, it's timeless. We're just using this particular person to point to the process steps.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. So now, take us to Genesis, my friend, and set that stage.
And this is why this is a multiple part subject, because I think that is a very important point. The fact that there are Christians who are going to be like, oh well, it can't work because they do all this other stuff. We don't even know if they believe in God.
Yeah.
But the thing is, just like God said, seed time and harvest, that's going to last until there is no more earth. So if your home address is on earth, guess what? Seed time and harvest will still exist.
Yeah.
Therefore, and it didn't say if you show up to this amount of Sunday services throughout the year.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, talking about Genesis, using the Bible as the blueprint, you're right. God he gave man dominion. He said, be fruitful and multiply. And really, man had to manage what he had, right? And I'm going to jump ahead for a minute, because I think structure-wise, one of the things that happened too, we talked about Jesus when you and I were talking, but I want to talk about Moses for a minute. So Moses, when he was leading the people out of Egypt, huge amount of folks he led out. Well, his father-in-law had to tell him, because everybody's coming to him to judge what's going on. Hey, Moses, we got a beef. What's going on? You got to fix it for us, or you got to minister and all this other stuff. His father-in-law said, man, you can't do all this by yourself. You got to get some help. So guess what? He got a team to actually take care of those issues. And if it got to the point where they couldn't resolve it, then it would come to him. Now, what does that sound like?
blueprint.
It sounds like a blueprint,
It's
doesn't
the
it?
blueprint. And you know what? That's such an important point, Rodney, that the power is in the team, really. And it makes me think of the movie 300.
Yeah.
When you had the 300 Spartan warriors going against thousands of, the armies that are opposing them. And what he had to explain, the general explained to the other guy is like, listen, my strength is in the other man. I rely on them to cover my flank. So that allows me to fully engage you and be victorious because I know my partner is willing to die for me and I'm willing to do the same for the guy next to me. So if you have every link in the chain strong as iron, how can you penetrate it? You can't. And so the strength is really in the team. It's not the I, it's the we.
Yes, yes.
There's a few things that I feel like before we really get to like outlining each part of this, a few things that we just got to break down. And I think we're going through that right now because the Bible, a lot of people will, well, a lot of cults will take a scripture or take a chapter or take a series of books and just put them together and say, this is the doctrine and those don't make sense. The other part of that book don't make sense because this is what we believe and this is what we're going with. But the Bible, all of it works together.
Yeah.
There is it doesn't contradict itself in any point of it.
No.
And throughout all of the Bible, it's talking about love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
It talks about, and the multitude of counselors, plans are established. The thing is, we need people. Yeah. we always
We're a tribal culture.
For sure.
Yeah.
100%. He made us. Look, Jesus is the king. God is the King of kings. That means that they're kings. We are those kings.
Right. Facts.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I think people throw that word around without understanding who God is and that this is a kingdom. And that when we accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, that we become part of his kingdom. Now, those who don't become part of another kingdom, whether they know it or not.
Right.
They become part of the world. Go ahead, man.
And then, so one of the key points that brings to mind your statement is our kingdomship looks different for every person. The way you serve, because I don't think a king is meant to rule, you're really meant to serve your people.
Right.
So the way you serve your people will look different than the way Martell will serve his people. It looks different than the way that Mike serves his people. But the key is we're all serving our people. We're doing this out of a stewardship.
Yeah.
We're not doing it out of obligation. We didn't have to be here today. No. We chose to be here. We made a choice. Like, it's really, I told you guys before we started rolling, like, look, I look forward to sitting down with you brothers. Whether the camera was rolling or not, I like talking to you guys because I know these are solid brothers. And every time that we speak, I know I'm going to take away something beneficial.
I got to say something. We didn't pay Mike to say that.
Yeah, I didn't give him a check. Did you?
But no, man, you're on point, Mike. You're on point.
And on that, look, there's the domain. I think I just heard this the other day. I thought it was profound. Well, it was profound-ish. It was cool. It was cool to hear.
It wasn't quite there, but it was close.
Right. You talk about, and in the Bible it says, if you want to lead, when he was talking to the disciples, it's like, if you want to lead, if you want to be first, then you're going to need to be last, right? And so the only context where the first is last is in a circle. And so we all kings, right? We have to be, if we're all kings working together, then we're together in this circle. Yeah. And so we're moving. Yeah. We're moving. And so you can't really distinguish, what part of this is the front and what part of it is the back if it's a circle.
Exactly. Yeah, and and going back to 300, when you said that, I'm just picturing in 300 their formations, right? So their formations it wasn't a circle per se, but it was like a boom, 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 boom. Like, when they came at them, they all
banded together.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They created one thing.
One thing, and no matter what angle you tried to come at them, they had they were guarded, and then they all attacked at the same time.
So an example that I would use with younger athletes, we always say like a fist. You have 5 fingers, right? each of these fingers alone are kind of weak. But when they come together, they make something strong, and you can really, make some impact.
Definitely. Yeah. And again, like that's the ball game right there.
Yeah.
And so when the individuals come together, they make one. I mean, shoot, when the man and the woman come together, they become one flesh.
Yes.
Right.
God built it into our DNA to need other people.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about Adam and Eve as they populated Earth and all that. Now, granted, they sin caused them will cause us all have to work the ground and do things that otherwise wouldn't have been needed to survive. But the point, though, is that humanity everybody had to do their part. They had, whether it be the hunter to go out and hunt the food, or there were those who was in the field who actually worked the land. People had different roles.
Yeah.
To feed the group. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So another phrase that comes to mind is collaboration over competition.
I like that.
You know what I'm saying? And in our culture specifically, I think this is something that is very much so a work in process. But I was having a conversation with a young lady this week, and she is a women's coach. And we were just talking about some of the different dynamics, and she was explaining to me that she has this series, and she speaks to all these women across the nation every morning at 5 a.m. call. And what she's finding is more and more discussion pointed towards our men and, kind of the lack of what some of these men are doing. Yeah. And so she was having this idea where she's like, listen, we can't win without each other. Our women can't win without us. Yeah. We cannot win without our women. Yes. But there's been distinct breakage and the roots of our foundation. And instead of just complaining about the problem and the issues, we got to come together, and we have to be a part of that solution.
That's. I just keep thinking about Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah. And so look, we got the people. We understand that it's going to take people. Going back to the blueprint we're talking about. In Genesis 1:28, first thing he said was to be fruitful.
Right.
Now, the misconception that we have is, okay, if I'm a king and I must rule over other people. But Bible doesn't contradict itself. We need other people. He's the King of Kings, and we are those kings because we're a part of the kingdom. We are heirs to the throne, right? And so what is your domain? That becomes the question. So if I'm a kingdom, I have a domain. This is God's domain, right? And so, but what is your domain? What is your domain? If we're working together, but I'm a king, what do I rule over? Yeah. And so, the part of that being fruitful, that everybody wasn't made to do everything.
Right.
Like you're good at certain things. God's given you certain gifts, and they're going to be different. And also your personality is going to be different. The people that you're going to be around is different. You might be an extrovert. You might be an introvert. And so what you do in the God's plan for your life specifically is different. It's a lot different than what he has for Michael Wright. Right.
Yeah. And going back to when you say be fruitful, that's not necessarily just having kids either. Right. And I think that's something where, any male can make a baby. Yeah. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you're a father to these kids.
Yes.
And even going outside of actual human beings, you have to be fruitful to your dreams. You have to be fruitful to what God wants for your life. All right. And that's where I think a lot of people get that misconstrued, because even this whole ministry, this started with a dream. It started with a thought. It started with an idea that God put on someone's heart. And then you have to be fruitful and let that dream manifest. You have to take action.
You can't do everything, like you said. That you can work. You take what you got, you do good, and put it with somebody else do good, and you work and help each other and grow together.
Now, let's go back though. Let's go back, because y'all are definitely on point. But I don't want people to. That's fine. I don't want people skipping steps. Okay. So that fruitful part. So like I broke down the word. So we got fruitful, a Hebrew word para, used 29 times in the King James Version. It's a verb. It's a primary root. Definition is to bear fruit, be fruitful, branch off. And so when you then translate that over, get it from the Merriam-Webster, is the effect or consequence of an action or operation, product, result. So so with that, it's not, like you said, it's not just having kids.
Right.
It's to produce a result. Okay. And so if I'm fruitful, that means, and if I'm, if you bear good fruit, because, you can only, if you, a good tree or a good seed is going to bear good fruit. And so if I'm fruitful and I'm producing this result and I'm producing it successfully, if I'm producing a good fruit, then I can move on to that multiplication step.
Yeah, and if you produce a good fruit, there's going to be an outward, harvest.
There's a consequence. There's a result of it.
You're gonna see that fruit grow. Because it's nothing worse than having used to do gardens when we lived in Detroit all the time, right? Nothing worse than planting a garden. Your plants are green. They look healthy as I don't know what, but they don't bear nothing.
And what's the purpose of that fruit? Yeah, it's meant to feed.
It is.
It's
So
meant to feed.
you're right, because if it sits there and you don't pick it, it'll rot on the vine.
Yeah. So for me, what that means is each one of you has fruit that you need to bear, and you have to feed people. Mm-hmm. You can't keep it for yourself. You have a whole, let's say the size of this room, full of fruit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool. We were able to accomplish our goal, but then what's the ultimate goal? You have to go out and distribute that fruit. One of the things that really hurts my heart, I recently did some volunteering for my kids' sporting events. We were at Ford Field, and we were helping out with the concession stands. We were raising money for the team. And the amount of food that we went through it was a high amount. People at games, they tend to drink and eat. It's like, but the amount of food that we had prepared, maybe 3 times of what we actually used. And so one of my questions was, what's happening with this food that we're just, we never sold? And to be honest, they're like, hey, take some for your family you want, but it ends up getting thrown out. And I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I said. Wow, we don't have to go far. Matter of fact, we can go literally right outside of Ford Field, and there's people walking around that may not have eaten today, yesterday, maybe not this week. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's one of the greatest crimes that, in America we do, where we have so much in abundance, but we don't have enough people that care enough about other people.
We waste it. We waste the fruit.
Yeah, we let it rot.
Yeah. But I think, we talk about the blueprint, talk about fruit and so forth. And maybe that's the people who are successful realize how to utilize the fruit. Mm-hmm. How to utilize every piece of it, not eliminate waste in the process. We were talking about Jay-Z, but you can use that same concept there. He's using everything, the music, every piece of it. Now his ownership, whatever he does, it plays into the bigger part, right?
Right. And I also think an important piece is defining what success looks like. What's your end goal, and then reverse engineer it to fit into the blueprint. Because someone can gain the world monetarily, but lose their soul in the process. You can lose your family in the process. You can die with millions and millions of dollars, and what is it really worth? So I think that's a very important piece of defining any blueprint or a plan, is knowing what are you aiming towards.
Mm-hmm. So let's not get too deep on people real quick.
Okay.
What does it take to be fruitful? What does that mean?
Okay.
And so if we're talking about the Genesis story. Mm-hmm. So before you multiply, you are fruitful. Now let's go ahead and put it into the context of Jay-Z. I assume most people know who that is, but if you don't, look him up. He rapped, he makes music, he did a bunch of other stuff.
Is that what he do?
Something like that.
Okay.
So he was first fruitful. So before before he was the billionaire, he had to first be fruitful. Now, if you're starting a business, right? If you're starting a business, you have to first be good at something. You have to be good at producing a result. Okay, and so the first being fruitful part was he had to work on his craft. He had the ability to create rhymes in his head, right? And he would write these rhymes down. And so then he wrote these rhymes down. There was a point where he probably wasn't the Jay-Z that we know today. He wasn't the million records sold Jay-Z. He first started off with, okay, that doesn't rhyme. Okay, let's put this together. Let's recraft this. Okay, okay, that sounds good, right? And then he's rapping because he started with just kind of small battle raps. He was just freestyling, right? Yeah. And then he wrote those rhymes down, and then after he freestyled, he started to work on his actual the rhymes that he wrote, and so he got to get better at it and better at it and better at it and better at it, and then he produced better and better rhymes, and then more people started to be interested in this thing that he was creating. The sounds that was coming out of him seemed to be better than other people's. Okay, and so then he was fruitful because then that result was something that people were interested in, and he distributed it. Okay, go ahead.
No, because as you're talking, and I think we've heard this concept in our men's 2.0 sessions. So when we talk about Genesis, you talk about what Jay-Z did. What you're fruitful first, you got to create. Mm-hmm. Then you got to cultivate.
Definitely.
You have to, and that's what in the beginning, that's what they had to do. And God created, and He cultivated.
I think God built us to be entrepreneurial.
Well, he built us
for real.
Yeah, that's how things started too. Because the interesting thing when you say that, because when we working for companies, look, I laugh at the job I have, laugh at the different things I've done in all my life, but that statement is interesting because when you do work for someone, you can have enslaved in your mentality that you lose your independence and you lose your creativity.
Yeah.
And you stop cultivating. You know what I mean? So if you're not careful, you can get, so when you say entrepreneurs have to create and cultivate to survive.
And what did Jesus do? What did God do? In the beginning, in the whole first page of the Bible, we're in His image. Mm-hmm. He created. He's a creator.
Yeah. But so this is interesting because the way we train our kids is really not to be entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We raise them in sit in the classroom for 8 hours, learn your academics, and go to college. I was just saying, I think before the cameras came on, where I really believe now that I look back, I went to college for my parents because I wanted to make them proud. Something they always talked about. That wasn't necessarily my dream. I really could have been doing real estate at 18 because I knew what I wanted to do. It was always in me, but I used to question it because the word kind of let me know. And I didn't see the blueprint clearly. So one thing, I've heard a quote where it's sometimes you have to trust God even when you can't trace God.
Say that again.
Sometimes you have to trust God even when you cannot trace God. So because I didn't know how the vision looked, I didn't have the process steps, I didn't have the blueprint clear as day, I questioned it. What if I don't succeed? What if I don't go to college and then I end up making the wrong decision?
That's the trick of the enemy.
It is.
100%. I mean, that's exactly what he did in the third pages of the Bible. So I think today, in this episode, I think we covered a little bit of the foundation. So we are talking about the blueprint, God's blueprint for building, for executing on the vision that He put in your life. And it all starts with being fruitful. And then when we're talking about being fruitful, even before that, it takes people. You got to understand it's going to take people. We got to understand that the enemy is going to try to tell you not to do the things that God wants you to do. The enemy's going to put a bunch of doubts in your head. But the thing is, it's already been laid out. God already said it, and the Bible does not contradict itself. Mm-hmm. He gave you something. There is something in you to be cultivated. And in that area, that is your domain. And with that, starting off with that, once you develop it, once you cultivate it, then you can begin the process, the black billionaire process, and really execute on the things that he's put into your heart. And so we're just laying the foundation here.
And I think to your question, where do we continue the conversation? I think we have to dig into that process a little bit more, because it's one thing to have a dream and, let's say a blueprint for today's topic, but you have to have actionable steps.
Yes.
And you have to take them.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have to do it with a good spirit. You have to do it. You have to focus on each step as if it's the only step in the world that matters right now, because it really is. Because if you don't execute on this step, that next step may never come.
You will never get to multiply if you aren't fruitful.
So to your point that you mentioned earlier, let's not skip any steps. That, to me, that's the biggest thing, where just be diligent in what you're doing right now. Be where your feet are, where your feet at, right here.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it. This is multiple parts. There's multiple parts to this series, and definitely leave some comments. Let me know. Let us know what your thoughts are. But this is an interesting subject, and I really love talking about this subject. And we will see you next week to pick up back on this. I'm Martel.
That's right.
Mike Wright.
We'll see y'all next week.
Peace.
Peace.